Hello and welcome to the Garden Log with me, Ben Darg. I am a gardener and a podcaster, and I'm speaking to you from the beautiful city of Copenhagen in the beautiful season of spring. You may have noticed me in the press quite a bit if you are listening to this in the UK. The Grove, my book, has made several of the national papers. But things took a worrying turn last week when I appeared in the Sun newspaper, a tabloid in the UK. And the first line was Ben Darg, who jokingly refers to himself as gardening's Joe Wicks. In all my years of this podcast, I've generally described myself as Ben Darg, gardener and podcaster. And this Joe Wicks association has been unfairly sprung upon me. The reporter phoned up. I sounded very nice, but very young. And they were a showbiz reporter. And I thought, oh dear, how am I going to sell these fairly in-depth garden design theory tips that I'm going to give them? And after they had very patiently sat through me explaining how to go to NGS open days and find the best spreading plants to fill space in your garden, the reporter said, "So, would you describe yourself as gardening's Joe Wicks?" And I suddenly realised, oh no, that's the brief they've been given. That's what they've been given by their editor. That's the article they've been told to write. And obviously I said, no, I wouldn't. But anyway, they printed it with Ben Darg, who jokingly refers to himself as horticulture's Joe Wicks. And so I suppose after playing the introductory music, it's only right that I double down and lead us all in a quick 20-minute home workout. Only joking. No workouts for us. Welcome to the week in gardening. Quite enough exercise for anyone here. I began the working week tackling some brutish plants. Plants that are often referred to as car park plants. And fittingly were growing here by a car park. I was taking out some Cotoneaster horizontalis, which was quite swinish to get out. It is a plant that goes into the soil and forms a clubbish root of very slow growing, very hard, dense wood. And then it reaches out its horizontal arms, the clue's in the name, and rests elbows on the floor and roots there. So you get a clump and you pull it out and you get some roots and you think, I've done it. By Jove, I've done it. I've got the plant. And you realize that that's just a satellite. That's the satellite of the main root. The real business is happening over here. It was pleasurable and painful in equal measure. This was a job I was doing as part of a volunteer workforce, an army of people giving their time and their muscle. And we were the replacement for what I would have done in the previous garden, which was drive a digger there and scoop the whole lot out in a half hour. Here we battled manfully with jokes and conversation and getting to know each other to accomplish a fifth of that work in 5 times the time. Very, very good for human connection and very bad on a time management spreadsheet. Though I did enjoy it a lot. It wasn't just the Cotoneaster horizontalis. It was one of those fully integrated ecosystems doing its best to tie itself to the surface of the world. It was I was thinking as I was heaving with spade and pickaxe that had I lived a different life and been an engineer and then been tasked with designing a solution to keep a piece of soil in place to stop it eroding or sliding down the hill. Then I'd probably drive in some very deep piles, some very deep poles, and then I would tie them all together with a grid of wires and cover the whole thing with a mesh, and that would be my perfect solution for anchoring the ground. And here we had just that done by nature, the big deep rooting Cotoneaster horizontalis, and then lashings of ground cover ivy running over the whole lot like steel thread, and then over the whole thing these noodly roots of ground elder meshing and weaving the whole thing together. It was almost the perfect anti-erosion, anti-landslide, keeping a hill in place system. Slightly annoying that the nature has decided to do this in what could be an ornamental bed in very flat Copenhagen, in very, very flat Denmark, the country with the world's least impressive record for spectacular landslides. But anyway, it was a good job to do. Heaving, sweating, talking, breaking for coffee, all of the good things in life. On my next volunteer day, things were very different. I was doing blissful, slow, lonely weeding in absolute luxury. The luxury of being able to chase every single root down to its tip and put it out properly. It's not something you can do really on a wage with a whole garden to manage, because there are more pressing tasks. Weeds can't be completely eradicated always. They need to be knocked back and stopped from overwhelming things. But as a volunteer, I am allowed my indulgences, I think. And it's probably better to have me there where I can't be doing damage to the garden and where the people in actual charge know where to find me, that I'm not charging around creating my own agenda and thinking this needs doing, just when actually proper paid people had scheduled it into their tasks for next week. Sorry, can you hear that? Agitated seagull out there. 2 agitated seagulls. Just flying off towards the waves now. They've realised that our garden is not their place. Anyway, Shush now. I was in an area called the Hans Christian Andersen Garden that will bloom later in the year in brilliant, dark crimson. There's a picture of the roses in the Hans Christian Andersen Garden on my Instagram page. If you go to that and look at, there's a little audio clip I've put down, and you can see that is over a picture of this glorious, glorious area. And I was battling my friend from last week's podcast, the Ornithogalum nutans, that bulb, battling it mainly in its pre-flowering stage, in its strappy, thinner than chive leaf stage, before it's built enough oomph in the bulb to start flowering these first and second, third and fourth year seedlings with leaves that detach insanely easily from the bulb, deep underground. They shed them like lizards shed their tails, and you think, no, missed it. I've still got that 5mm bulb underground somewhere. I didn't get it all out. It's a wonderful sensory experience. I mean, it's frustrating, but it's wonderful when you get one of those bulb snaps, because it's impossible to tell if you're feeling it or hearing it. And I can't quite work out which one is giving me the clue that it's snapped. It's like when you hit a bit of sand in a sandwich you're eating on the beach, and that big crunch, and you think, did I feel that or did I hear it? When you have time to weed and you can really get into it, you need an adversary like this, because there's no real sense of satisfaction unless there is a real danger of failure. I think my failure rate was probably pretty high. Maybe 55% of them remained in the ground. And when the bulbs came out, like little tiny oval cocktail onions, it was a real moment of pleasure. I don't know what the weather has been like wherever you are listening to this, but here it has been sunny and fairly hot. And that gave me the opportunity to do this weeding from one of my absolute favourite positions in horticulture, which is deep, deep shade on a truly sunny day, looking out into the glare like a troll under the bridge. I was able to really lose time in there, and there was a great moment when I'd been sort of lost in a weeding trance, and suddenly there was this flash, and a boy and a girl in kitchen aprons were hurrying past with baking trays, silver baking trays covered in foil, and they were so fast and their aprons were flapping and then they were gone. And I had sort of settled into the speed of the plant, so it was a shock to see people working at kitchen speed. You know, that kitchen ballet when everyone's rushing around and there's flaring fire and the drama of how I overcooked something. Will I hit my dinner time deadline? Is everyone going to be happy with it? They move at such a different pace from the gardeners. They're like they're from another world. And I sort of thought, well, how many times has that revelation, that shock happened in the long history of gardens and kitchens and gardeners and cooks and stately homes and big old banquets? I saw them as a blur, but I wonder if they saw me at all. I probably looked a bit like a tree stump. The next day I took a trip to Tivoli Gardens, the ancient theme park, which I think is probably the sort of psychogeographical heart of Copenhagen. It is more a part of life here than theme parks in the UK, which are out of the city and visited on sixth form days after your exams or whatever. Tivoli Gardens seems to be a place where people will go every year for a dinner or after work. And it has retained the gardens of its title. It was once the Tivoli and Vauxhall Gardens, as someone covering all their bases. Tivoli, obviously, in Paris, and Vauxhall in London, two pleasure gardens. And this was designed as a pleasure garden. And before the roller coasters came, there were the ponds, the displays, the beddings, and the tulips. And they remain. There is a huge amount of work that goes into these spring displays. I was very, very impressed. It's a masterpiece of container planting. And we wandered around again in the heat. The daffodils were fried and almost done. There were quite a few bulbicodium, the hoop petticoat daffodils, retained in some of the grass banks, along with muscari, the great hyacinth. And there were vast crown imperials, that huge, strange fritillary that looks like a cross between a pineapple and some ancient four-faced god. It was all over exuberance and shouting of spring. My favourite part of the garden was obviously a tiny little mistake, that little mistake that makes the rest perfect. There was a very, very dark black tulip, a single one that can only have been a mistake, in a vast bank of full pink cups, and it looked like a little mole on a vast heaving expanse of flesh. And I thought that was wonderful to see. It really humanised the planting. It must have been something that escaped from last year's display. Each year they are changed, and this one managed to lurk lower in the soil and come up again. There were lots of tulip of the moment, La Belle Epoque, which is everywhere on social media. I saw it described, I think it was by Andrew O'Brien, the gardener and writer and blogger, and he was describing it as this year's Café Late Dahlia. And I think he's right. It's everywhere. It photographs incredibly well, but I don't think it looks particularly good in the garden. All of the large doubles were looking dry and crispy in the heat, and the belle époque, with its flesh tones and its rather complicated appearance, didn't sit well with the lush, verdant spring foliage. I quite enjoyed seeing beds full of rhubarb as an ornamental, beds that were at head height as you're walking through the park. Anyone who has been to a theme park will know how they play with levels and ramps to fit people into the queues and to fit as much as they can onto as small a footprint as possible. So you're always going up and down a ramp or over and under or something. And this was a raised bed, head height, full of these beautiful, beautiful rhubarb red stalks. And that was wonderful to see because they're selling rhubarbs outside all of the supermarkets here. But like supermarket plants everywhere, they specialise in getting them to just that stage of drought where they are almost dead. The next 2 days I spent in my own garden. On the Thursday I was wandering around looking at the lawn. There's some good cuckoo plants coming up and lots of daisies. And I was hunting for the daisy seed heads, which are like pigeon squabs. You know how people always say, you never see a baby pigeon. And that's for the best. I have seen them. They're terribly ugly things. But you never see a daisy seed head. Daisy flowers everywhere. What are their seed heads? What do they look like? So I was hunting for those. And then I went for a little run, a jog, a slope around. Gosh, I am Joe Wicks. I went for a run around our sort of prunusy, heavily petalled suburb, spotting the big double-flowered Kansan cherries that are just coming out now, those mauve-tinted monsters that you see all over suburban London and quite a lot over here. And then I came home to do some planting. I was planting creeping jenny, which is Lysimachia nummularia, under this bed full of cotinus and mahonia and hornbeam. So it's a very shady bed, which Lysimachia nummularia, the creeping jenny, will be absolutely fine with. It can do shade. It's a plant of the woodland edges, and even into the woodland. It will creep its way into quite deep shade. But it's a plant of wet woodland, and this is dry shade. So it might not like it. It always grows best in gardens where I've been working. Grows pestily, grows like a plague. In places where you've got a leak from the irrigation system or from the tap, you realise that something's gone wrong because creeping jenny has got there and is thriving. But if it's happy, which I might have to assist with, it will spread and fill space, and it roots absurdly easily from cuttings, so I should be able to shift it around the place a little bit. I've gone for the plain green species type, the native of these parts and of the British Isles as well. It's not as commonly planted as the golden leaf version, the aurea, but I find that yellowy green sometimes a bit too much, and underneath a purple-leaved cotinus, I think it would be verging towards surreal. It would be like one of those 90s music videos where they've swapped the colour balance around. The sky is pink and people's faces are blue, and that's not the welcome home that I think that I need to receive every single day. And the next day I fiddled around looking at my seedlings. I've got a very good germination rate from my freezer bag technique. I know I'm quite late on these seeds, but I was away and I didn't want to start anything off in its delicate early days while I was in London and Italy. I've been planting Zinnia peruviana, that's just the species, the very red one, and Tagetes tenuifolia, paprika, and an awful cosmos candy stripe. It's horrible. It's exactly what you'd think a cosmos candy stripe would look like. But unfortunately, I've given away all of my nice cosmos, all of my yellow cosmos. We've had a big packet of seeds from Holland lying around. And whenever we have guests, a giveaway of seeds, and those attractive cosmos obviously have gone first. And we are left with this rather interesting flower that's going to look like someone dressed up for an exciting day at the regatta. Anyway, they've all germinated very well in their little freezer trays with holes poked in the bottom. Those trays that you get your takeaway food in, and then slotted into freezer bags and left outside on a garden table. A very cheap and easy way to get them to their true leaf stage when I will pot them out and plant them in something more appropriate. It's that funny stage of the year where there are seed packets in various fridges and freezers lying around, the ones that need cold stratification. I keep opening up and saying, oh gosh, there's a load of anti-rhinum in here. I really need to do some more planting if I'm going to catch the rest of this growing season. The problem with my technique is when to take the freezer bag off. The cosmos particularly are racing up. They grow so quickly. There's so much in that seed. They get the cotyledons out. They unbend their neck and the true leaves come very quickly. And I don't want them pressing against this wet plastic and potentially rotting. But if I take the bag off, then they are open to the air and all of the creatures the air contains. And we have taught the sparrows very, very effectively that ours is a garden in which seeds are eaten. And there's very little difference visually, and I guess nutritionally, between a cosmos seed and whatever we have in that mix that the sparrows eat. And so I'm just wondering when does a seed stop becoming appealing to a sparrow? Is it sort of bean sprout stage or cotyledon stage? I suppose it's when the bird knows that to pull this out will bring with it a root and a little beak-muddying parcel of soil, and they really don't want to deal with that crunchy, gritty problem. So maybe I'll wait another couple of days, and then by then they should have a root with little root hairs, enough to collect a gob of mud. Anyway, enough of that. That was my week in gardening. I imagine it was somehow very similar and also very different to your week in gardening. That's the wonder of this hobby, profession, calling that we find ourselves in. Now I'm going to play the music, and after that we're going to have a horticultural conundrum from one of the listeners. My horticultural conundrum, my horticultural correspondence, maybe I should call it, this week comes from Julia. And Julia has written, "Hello Ben, and first of all, best of luck with the publication of your book. I'm sure it will go well." Thank you, Julia. It has gone well so far. My question concerns front gardens too, although it is more of a rhetorical question, along the lines of, what kind of person has done this? That is capitalized, by the way. That's why I did the "what kind of person has done this" voice. Rather than a straight horticultural question. 40 years ago, I planted a beautiful Pyrus pendifolia ornamental pear tree in the front garden of the house in which we lived. We have moved away since, but in the intervening years, it has grown into an absolute vision in a street otherwise bereft of any greenery. About 20 foot high, and often a little halo of birds using its top as a vantage point. However, the house has just recently changed hands again, and lo and behold, the tree has been demolished and replaced by a double bin store. As I have neither the right nor the nerve to go in and accuse the new owner of Philistinism, I thought I would just seek the emotional companionship of another front garden enthusiast. How could this ever seem like the right thing to do? The new owner's name... This is great. I won't say the name. The new owner is by name blank, incidentally. I'll let the reader fill in what kind of person's name they would think has done this. Anyway, enough said. Best luck again with your book, which I will be buying as soon as I get away from disputatious emailing. Kind regards, Julia. What a wonderful email. Thank you, Julia. I love the little personal details in there, the name. And I agree that is a very, blank thing to do. It's unfortunate that all we can do is rant, as you have rightly worked out. But it is frustrating, particularly when it is for something like the bin store, for something that is ubiquitous but almost unnecessary in a front garden. We have so little space for greenery, we have so little beauty to look at on our streets, and then we have these great big hulking wheelie bins everywhere. It's so frustrating to see a wheelie bin store replace proper greenery, particularly when they stick a little sedum roof on the top. Well, actually, I suppose that's better than not having a sedum roof. But you think, yes, the sedum is lovely, but it is in a membrane of soil suspended above all of your used cellophane wrapping, whereas what we had here before was a great big tap into the centre of the earth, a thing bringing up nature and goodness. Recycling and separate bins is all very well and good, but we should be campaigning for less packaging, less need for bins. If bins could only be a third of the size, then no one would need to knock down trees. In terms of what you can do about it, I mean, the Pyrus pendula is gone. There is no bringing it back. The question is, can you forgive the lady whose name we shall not mention, or do you want to wage a campaign of psychological warfare? If you do, you could perhaps print out some pictures you might have from your archives of the tree, looking beautiful, silver foliaged, glittering with its halo of small birds flittering around it, and stick them to the lampposts around with a "Have you seen this tree?" sort of caption that might inflict a little bit of remorse. The trouble is that front gardens change. Part of their beauty and vulnerability is that they are ever in flux, and people use them for their own needs. In 40 years' time, we might well have the woman by the name of blank writing into a favourite wheelie bin podcast saying, my bin store that I built and loved has been knocked down and replaced by some silvery pear tree. It's awful. I have such happy memories of walking past those bins every single day. In the book, I write about real front gardens, and they have real names, real house numbers, so you can go and see them. And since writing it, I've been in correspondence with some of them who have pointed out things to me. There's one where I not accuse, but pay one wisteria the compliment of saying imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and point out that there is another tiny wisteria growing in the house next door that will one day reach its size and join up. And the householder has written to me with a photograph that demonstrates that they had the wisteria first, and this is a little wisteria victory that they can take with them. They are entirely correct to do so. And I'm afraid that your Pyrus will have to live with you inside your head, as it obviously has no place in blank's head. So to answer your question, how could this ever seem like the right thing to do? I suppose we must just look at the world around us, look at all of the awful things that we have to hope in good faith seemed like the right thing to do to certain people, and thank our lucky stars that the lady by the name of was only in charge of a small front garden and a Pyrus, and not a country or an oil tanker or a failing school or anything bigger that this sort of person would inevitably destroy and replace with wheelie bin stores. Thank you, Julia, for your wonderful email. I do particularly like it when there is a humour and a real sense of personality coming through. I'm sure in the years since that Pyrus was planted, you have planted a great many things in other gardens that do continue to live on and bring joy to passers-by and birds alike. If anyone would like to join Julia in writing to the Garden Log with a horticultural conundrum or just some horticultural commentary, personal vendettas and the airing of old grievances, obviously highly encouraged. In the meantime, if you're not going to write to the Garden Log podcast at gmail.com, You can find me on Instagram or on Twitter or on Facebook, where there is a private Facebook group under the Garden Log podcast, heading somewhere in that labyrinth. I will be back next week with more tales from the garden, and I very much hope to find you all there and listening. Thank you very much, and goodbye.